Hello, and welcome back to the Performance Marketing Unlocked podcast. I'm your host, Joseph Arthur, PMW's Multimedia editor. On this edition of the show, I'm joined by our news reporter, Reem Makari, to dive into AI, Google, and the future of search. Three very big themes across the news desk at the moment, as well as across the industry. A lot of thought leaders and talking heads are touching on the future of AI, the future of Google as it suffers some ongoing legal complications and battles both in the US and in the EU, and of course the future of search and what happens there with the continued growth of social media as a potential competitor to traditional search, as well as AI and large language models. So we've got three big performance marketing adjacent topics for you to enjoy Reem and I postulating on in this episode. So with that said, it's time to sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of the Performance Marketing Unlocked podcast. Reem, hello and welcome back to the Performance Marketing Unlocked studio. How are you doing today? Are you still enjoying autumn, or are you sick of it yet?
You know what? I'm still enjoying it. I'm enjoying how nice and cool it is and getting in the cozy vibes. So I'm not against it.
It doesn't bother you that you can't plan a moment of your day at any one time because it might start raining for 15 minutes torrentially and completely ruin the picnic you hope to have.
But it's all about the layering.
And then it might become sunny for the next hour and a half and you think, I just spent my whole weekend looking out the window going, I think I'm going to chance it and I'm going to go outside and do something. But it's so lovely.
Those glimpses of it being sunny, it feels like a reward for just bearing through all of the rain and get to appreciate it and savor it a bit more.
I feel like that when it becomes summer after winter, but the weather in London at the moment, for listeners not in London, it's impossible to predict. I can't do it. I don't know what to wear outside. I don't know what to do when I'm outside. I need to take an umbrella everywhere, evidently. And if I do, it'll be nice and sunny. Yeah. But the moment I forget it, I'll be caught in a hailstorm.
I will say, in your defense, literally a couple of days or a day after me and Jyoti were talking about how much we love autumn, we were out on our PMW team day and it started pouring rain. And it was just awful trying to walk under it. And you were just venting to us saying, this is what you get for loving autumn.
I mean, my frustrations have never been made clearer than that exact circumstance. And it was just Murphy's Law. The moment we were all out having our lovely team day out, the heavens opened for literally just that 2-3 minute period when we were walking from one venue to the next. Anyway, with my weekly rant out of the way, It's time to jump into... I want to focus at the beginning of this episode on what is the sort of headline pieces of work across the website from this week, and that is 3 tough questions, the latest edition of our investigative series, this time diving into AI. Without revealing too much of what's in those reports itself, I just wanted to unpack a little bit about what the questions are and maybe what we sort of learned from the process of diving into the world of AI and trying to get some expert takes on and some transparency on where we're really at when it comes to the future of jobs, the future of marketing and targeting, and then what does it all mean for search and the impact of things like AI overviews. So I wanted to start with, what was the question you sought out to answer in your investigation, and what were some of the things you learned?
So my question was, will AI make performance marketers extinct? Which is a very bleak question.
Well, it's a question on everyone's lips, so it's a very important one.
Yeah, and it was also, a huge sort of wake-up call, and at the same time not really a wake-up call, because it is something that is on everyone's mind going into researching this chapter and interviewing people for it. And it's not just something that affects performance marketers, because us as journalists as well, we think about, is our job going to be replaced by AI? And it's a question that everyone in any industry asks. But the good thing is, without revealing too much about the details in the chapter, there was also weirdly some positivity in there. Yes, there were areas where you could see the negative impact of AI, where you see with a lot of companies there's a lot of restructuring, there's a lot of firing that's happening, and there's a lot of jobs that are not being replaced because AI is the solution for them and that's taking over. And that, when you're reading just about these areas, yes, it's very scary and you're kind of left thinking, what am I going to be doing in 5 years' time? Maybe even like a year's time when AI is going to take over. But at the same time, a lot of my interviewees were talking about how this is just a period where it's more about upskilling. It's more about learning about which areas can humans do and focus on that AI can't, and how can you show to your company, to your boss, to your colleague that your role is important by taking care of those areas, and then working alongside AI to allow you to do that work more efficiently and not have to focus on the boring tasks that take hours and hours out of your day. There is parts of this chapter where it basically talks about how you could prepare for that.
Becoming more AI literate seems to be something that, and I imagine that's not a big surprise to anyone, but the idea of having to justify yourself and justify your existence within a company and your role, that's certainly challenging. And there's a lot of threats as well as opportunities that come with that, which I imagine the chapter delves into in a little bit more detail. But it's fascinating. And the second chapter, which was Robin's, and that came out a little earlier this week, he dug into this phenomenon of whether or not we should start marketing to machines and targeting other AI agents. And it's getting into the whole agentic shopping of using AI to market to AI as opposed to consumers, and things like Amazon Rufus and how it's becoming more of a shopping assistant, I think, have sort of led that question. And Robin sent over some points that he thought were relevant to reference that might pique the listener's interest when it comes to his chapter. The broad theme of it is it follows a trend that was touched on in the last episode with Subazari when it comes to what can the e-commerce industry do about Amazon Rufus. And she said you've sort of got to try and copy it and come up with your own solutions that do more or less the same thing.
Yeah.
And when it comes to should we be marketing for machines, well, I'll let Robin in his chapter dive into the answers to that question. But a lot of people were talking about, do we just use good SEO practices for GEO practices now? And is that the solution? Do we just take what worked for SEO and make that work for GEO and copy it in that sense? The other thing was, if we're targeting citations, well, is that now just the replacement for targeting keywords? Do you see what I'm getting at? It's sort of, even if we're marketing to machines and not people, do the structures and the goals still remain the same?
Yeah.
And you'll have to read on to see if that what experts think of that. But it's interesting to think that maybe some people are treating AI innovation as just, this next iteration of search, and we'll use the same tactics for the modern day.
And I think there's a lot of talk about the different solutions that you could go to, like saying if you should copy Rufus, or if you should create your own model, or you should copy this other thing and whatever. And I think this period is going to be a lot of trial and error and trying to see what works for you, what works for your consumers, what works for your brand. And it's not like a one-size-fits-all model.
Yeah, because you'll get these new ad formats coming from the likes of AI Mode, Copilot, and Perplexity, a lot more of these sort of prompt-based ads that marketers are going to have. And that in and itself is a new sort of ad format. But is that genuinely innovative, or are people just going to come up with these lazy copies of existing formats because that's what marketers are comfortable with? And I don't know, it speaks to, in some ways, people are getting creative with the resurgence of MMM and marketing mix modeling, and in others, I can see people leaning on third-party data and just sort of using that as a foundation of, let's just stick with the old principles that worked and adapt it as best we can and as lazily and easily as we can for AI. Certainly an interesting outlook on the future. The third and final chapter for me dug into whether or not the click era is over when it comes to marketing, and if that's the case, what is going to replace it? A lot of things have come up: zero-click search, GEO, new metrics. My big takeaway was there is a big answer-first attitude when it comes to current consumer search. It's why things like Wikipedia and Reddit have been doing so well in AI overviews and citations. And it just comes back to consumer culture is we want everything right now, exactly when we want it. And I think that's now AI is letting consumers leverage that desire even more in their search behavior. They just want the exact answers to very specific questions immediately with no research, not even a click, not even a follow-up. I just want it all there in a quick little succinct dot points. It's like, did you ever use Spark Notes at university or in high school?
No.
So it's a popular website where if you needed to read a book for your English, you didn't want to read the book, you'd go to Spark Notes and it would give you a bit of a more succinct and concise, condensed outline of exactly what the book's about, some of the key themes.
Yeah, like a cheat sheet.
I think AI mode is a cheat sheet. Can't say that. Neither of us can say. Is a cheat sheet for search, like traditional search. Instead of having to go through links to websites and do research, just have AI do the research for you and make it as digestible as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think the takeaway there is like marketers underestimate how important convenience is to consumers, and even if you can't compete with AI mode, with AI overviews or ChatGPT, which can give consumers those answers directly and give them a summary, what you could then do is, if you want to direct people to your website or your applications, make it as convenient as possible for your consumers. Make it so that your homepage, it's easy for them to find what they need immediately. Include one of those AI chats in the corner, so that if they have a question about refunds, whatever, they can then talk to an AI bot which can direct them to those answers directly, and make the descriptions of your item very simple and easy to read. And think about how your consumer is going to get the things that they need ASAP without spending more than 5 minutes on your website. I think that's where the focus should be.
It's content, really, is what it comes down to. And you'll have to read on the chapter for the sort of the in-depth outlook of exactly what might be the metrics that you need to be worrying about now, and a little less on some of maybe these older ones, and exactly how you can go about, what's the blueprint for this next the era of search being over and the era of AI search coming in instead, zero-click search, as we said. But the sort of bare bones of it is very much, it's this same attitude of immediacy and consumerism is taking over. And I think content is really critical to that.
Yeah.
You need good content on your website. It needs to be relevant. It needs to be authentic, because you've got less than a moment to capture a consumer's attention and keep them on that web page and give them just get them into that purchase cycle, and that's across e-commerce, even if you're a brand, and you're, no matter where you are on the funnel, upper or lower, if you want to capture and maintain consumer attention, content has just got to be top of mind, doesn't it?
Completely.
Hello, Performance Marketing Unlocked listeners. Host Joe here, interrupting your episode very briefly to tell you about Performance Marketing World Unlocked, the ultimate event for performance marketers, which is returning for 2026. PMW Unlocked will be back in the Business Design Centre in London on the 3rd and 4th of March next year. It is the essential event for professionals committed to unlocking the full power of performance marketing, and brings together over 2,000 marketers, more than 70 speakers, and 6 streams of cutting-edge content. We're already thrilled to have leaders from top brands confirmed for our agenda, including Puma, American Express, and the Financial Times. Whether you're there to enjoy content from our expert speakers or soak up some networking that actually matters at our famous exclusive Performance Marketing World Unlocked after party, this event is not to be missed. There's 2 types of tickets. We've got 1,500 free brand tickets available at www.performancemarketingunlocked.com. And at the same link, there are agency, supplier, and affiliate tickets available for purchase, where at the moment, if you hurry, you can save £300. Now, there's limited availability for those, so agencies, suppliers, and affiliates, make sure you head to that link ASAP. In 2026, excitingly, we will also be hosting the PMW Forum hosted buyer program as part of PMW Unlocked. The exclusive offering is open to senior brand marketers, and you can register your interest in our Hosted Buyer program for exclusive one-to-one meetings, a complimentary hotel stay, and tailored networking to find specialist partners at the same www.performancemarketingunlock.com link. With all that said, let's get back to the episode, and I'll see you there at the BDC next year. One other learning from my chapter is obviously there's a very big sea change happening in the search landscape. That's undeniable. There's also a big sea change happening when it comes to the adtech landscape. Google currently, according to US federal courts, holds a monopoly on both of those things.
Yep.
A search monopoly and an adtech monopoly. So I wanted to shift this discussion slightly into the pressure Google seems to be facing and how it's responding to these things. So not just from AI, and the effectiveness of AI overviews reflects Google's ability to sort of innovate and stay at the cutting edge within the AI arms race. But it's suffering in a lot of different ways, specifically legally at the moment, in terms of legal challenges. And we saw just this week, the EU had planned to fine it for anti-competitive practices. That fine was then rescinded. Then a couple of days later, they fined them for adtech dominance abuse. We also had the findings in the US federal court with regard to its search monopoly remedies. There was calls for it to break up its search landscape, having to sell off Chrome, for example. Instead, the remedies determined whether it needs to share a little bit of its data with its competitors. What did you make of that before we get into the industry? On the search remedies not having to sell off Chrome, did you think they got off easy, or did you think it was fair?
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think Google's suffering. I think Google's fine.
Yeah.
I think Google's chilling. They're making enough money, especially, but like you said, they are innovating. AI overviews, obviously a big thing. AI mode as well. They have a lot of money. They're one of the biggest tech companies to exist. So the fact that they're getting off easy, I think they're fine. Like even the fines that were happening in the EU, they initially was supposed to be a modest fine compared to like much bigger fines that they had in the past. And then they ended up removing that fine, and then they fined them up to like 3 billion, I think. 3 billion
3 billion
euros.
euros, so the equivalent of about £2.5 billion.
Yeah, which for Google, that's nothing. And then with Chrome, they were let off easy. And I think there's a lot of factors that play into that. But with Chrome, I was seeing on LinkedIn that actually OpenAI and ChatGPT being in the market is the reason why Chrome is Google is allowed to keep it, is because that proves that there is competition.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that's why Google's not being told to sell off Chrome. And I think yes, they're going to have to be sharing data with competitors now as a solution, but because of Google's dominance, I don't think they're really going to be affected negatively by it. I think for them it's just another thing to do so that they can ignore the illegal stuff and just do what they want.
Yeah, the general sentiment we did a story of this on the site, a bit of a sort of follow-up analysis, speaking to several experts on exactly what they thought of the Google ruling. And it seems to be the general industry sentiment is they've got off pretty easy when it comes to having a search monopoly and the consequences of that. It's not totally clear exactly what kind of data they will have to share with competitors and whether or not that would actually be useful. It's not like Google and Chrome is just becoming open source. But selling off Chrome, I think that lost a little bit of steam to the point you claim there, where I don't know if you can fairly say that there's no competition for Google in the search landscape. Because if you're looking at Chrome, that's the dominant, that's certainly more dominant than the likes of Bing in that sense.
Yeah.
But ChatGPT and Perplexity and even Gemini, they're competitors to search these days. They're totally competitors
100%.
to Chrome. So I don't know if selling it off. Perplexity were rumoured to be preparing a bid to buy Chrome. So, I mean, who knows what would have happened in the landscape if that came off.
Also, social is now kind of, I don't know if they can almost count it as competition to Google and to Chrome in terms of search, because a lot of search is
TikTok
happening
and
across
Meta's
social.
own apps. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I completely agree. But I also agree that it is a bit light in terms of the remedies on Google's front, because it doesn't really make any implications for the short term.
Yeah.
In the long term, the data sharing might amount to more increased competition when it comes to search, but the landscape is changing so rapidly. You can't really look 5 years down the line with any authority and say, well, this is going to help us do this.
Yeah.
You don't know what search is going to look like.
Well, I mean, last year when the trial started and I was reporting from updates from the trial what's happening in the US for PMW, I remember, I think we talked about this on the podcast at one point as well. I think to the adtech world, this is a huge deal. What's happening with Google and them being told that Google's a search monopoly and that it has an adtech monopoly. It's a huge deal in the adtech world. But from an outside perspective, for consumers, for people that aren't involved in this industry, they don't care. Like, it's not gonna...
no relevance.
Yeah. It's not going to affect them whatsoever. Like, whether Google's determined a search monopoly or adtech monopoly or not, if your parents use Chrome as their go-to search, they're going to continue to use Chrome. If they use ChatGPT, they're going to continue to use ChatGPT. For them, it's about what have I known the longest and what's going to be the most convenient for me. And I think that's, like we said before, the focus should be about how do you make things convenient for consumers, and that's how you're going to get them. The competition with Google's always going to be dominant. Nothing is going to change that. No ruling is going to be able to change that.
I think the most interesting point for me there is the two distinct monopolies, the one being search and the one being ad tech, very different. The search monopoly, yes, the remedies, you could look at it being a little bit soft because they've got to share a little bit of data, shouldn't have too much of an impact in the short term, maybe in the long term, but they get to keep Chrome, continue to innovate and compete in this AI arms race, which is becoming the future of search, the social, large language models, and then these more traditional browsers like Chrome. The adtech one is a bit of a different beast for me. I think that's one where the remedies could potentially be a little bit more significant and have a bit more implication when it comes to ensuring competitiveness in the landscape. And this bodes well to Google. It's certainly maintaining its dominance, and from all reports, it's doing very well with the likes of AI overviews and the success of Gemini and all of its search tools. On the ad tech front, it still remains dominant too. It is a monopoly, but I don't know if it's quite chilling per se in this respect, because OpenX has opened a lawsuit against Google for anti-competitive practices on the ad tech front, and PubMatic, as recently as earlier this week, has now filed a lawsuit against Google in the US federal court for ad tech abuse. So that's now two lawsuits from big ad servers and advertising exchanges coming after Google for anti-competitive practices. That's something it's got to contend with. And there is a hearing set for later this year to determine Google's ad tech monopoly remedies.
Yeah.
Do you think because of the pressure it's facing from ad exchanges like PubMatic and OpenX, the remedies for its ad tech monopoly might be a little bit more severe? Because I don't see as clear a potential for competition in the ad tech landscape compared to the search one.
I don't know. I think they'll get a fine, and that's that. If I'm being honest, because
you don't think they'll be able to impose anything that really changes?
No, and I think there's a lot of different factors for this. I think, yes, PubMatic had the lawsuit this week, but also this is not the first lawsuit that Google faces from an ad tech company. Like they've had many in the past, and
they are just seeking damages too, which is not like the remedy for these is in theory just giving them money for damages and however many billions, but ultimately it's not going to bear too much, you would think, on Google financially.
And also, like, currently in the US, Trump is president, and Trump is actively backing Google as well. I mean, he threw a fit on socials when
over the EU fines he did, absolutely, yeah.
And I think he'll do the same if they get a harsh fine in the US, and if they get remedies that are like even worse than a fine. I think they're gonna be let off with like a slap on the wrist, essentially.
I see where you're coming from the EU perspective, and just it's clear that if Trump and the government are in Google's corner domestically when it comes to what the likes of the EU and the international community think of Google's behaviour. Sure, I'm not surprised that it's an American company. Trump's been very pro-America in all of his stances. The tariffs reflect that. He's going to come to Google's defense. The search and ad tech monopolies, that's all in the US federal court, though. Yeah. And the remedies are domestic for the purposes of it's a US company facing a US federal court and US based lawsuits. So I don't know. I'm slightly more optimistic that the remedies could be more severe. And looking at the search remedies, I can kind of understand where the judge is coming from in that things are changing so much. I don't know if it's fair to say, even though Google is so dominant, I don't know if it's necessarily fair to say it holds a total monopoly, because I just don't think that's true. Between like TikTok and social media is competition. Large language models that aren't Gemini and AI mode and AI overviews, of which there are plenty, is competition. And they're getting a little bit of market share from all reports. The ad tech side of things is I see the argument of it's just more Google dominance. And is there a way to shake things up? Maybe. In terms of what those remedies might look like, it's not for me to say, and I'd hate to come to those determinations myself. I mean, it's
I think
a level of complexity I'm not ready for.
I think, if I'm being honest, like the search monopoly one is like maybe 5 years too late, because currently there's competition. If this was years ago, I think they would have been completely in the right to say Google does have a search monopoly. I am curious though about if there's going to be an AI monopoly case.
Yeah, this is the final point we wanted to get to is, what about AI-related lawsuits, AI regulation? Is this where we're headed? Is that the next iteration? It will be claims of search monopoly, ad tech monopoly, AI monopoly. Yeah.
Well, there's been a couple of cases already where Elon Musk's AI startup, XAI, which I was not very familiar with, apparently filed a lawsuit against Apple and OpenAI for illegally conspiring to stifle competition. And then on another case, an AI developer called Eliza Labs is also suing Elon Musk for alleged monopoly abuse and for demanding a prohibitive license fee, suspending Eliza's account, and then copying its proprietary AI technology. So there's like some mini cases happening, Musk involved in both, of course. And I think there's going to be more of that in the future, because, I mean, OpenAI, I think it might be considered, the most dominant in terms of like the one that's most developed at this point in AI technology.
It probably has the most public notoriety.
Yes. Yeah. But then there's also obviously Gemini and Perplexity and Musk's one, which I've not heard of.
The likes of DeepSeek as well. The Eastern and the Chinese large language models, we can't forget either.
Yeah, so I think there will be a case at some point in the future about competition in AI, and then trying to claim which one owns a monopoly.
That's the thing. I think AI, there's so clearly a hotbed of competition.
Yeah.
It is a monopoly in the sense that there's about 4 or 5 key players, and it's very hard for anyone else to get in. Truly, it's Microsoft, it's Google, it's Meta, and then X, and some of the more Eastern market ones are trying to get in on it. But Perplexity is another one. So it's a pretty healthy level of competition among 7 or 8 key players on the AI front. So to me, I don't know how tenable or realistic a monopoly is in the short term. The future, who knows? But the regulatory and legal implications are very interesting, because there's very little regulatory and legal frameworks that can keep up with the rate of innovation AI is moving at. So, I mean, I can't even imagine trying to file and come to a determination on an AI-based lawsuit like Musk has been involved with there, because geographically there's not a standardized set of regulations across the EU or North America or anywhere else. And anything that comes in, it's going to be behind. It's almost like any AI regulation that they try and set is going to be behind innovation, so much so that it almost becomes outdated immediately.
Yeah, and I mean, also, I think Meta might be one that's trying to head in that direction, or at least like attempting to, because obviously Mark Zuckerberg is building his huge super intelligence AI team, and he is poaching people that are working in OpenAI and working in big AI companies as well. So I think he's attempting to be the one who's most dominant, to make Meta most dominant in that space. But currently, like you said, there's also competition within big tech. I think where it comes to the smaller companies versus the big ones, that's where it's a bit more of an issue.
The ongoing AI arms race. That's truly where we're at. and who knows where it's going to go in the future. But that's a good layer of the land, and we do get into this in a little bit more depth, and we touch on these themes specifically with relevance to marketers and brands and advertisers and what you can do to future-proof yourself against AI from, as we touched on at the beginning, a job standpoint, a targeting standpoint, and a search standpoint. So go read 3 Tough Questions, and you can get all of the information to map out a bit of a blueprint for future success and ensure that your position is safe for the future, as safe as it can possibly be in this ever-changing landscape.
Yeah, my chapter has a whole guide on how to do that.
There you go. So dive into all that. Reem, thank you very much for joining me. As always, it's always a pleasure.
Thank you.
And that concludes this episode of the Performance Marketing Unlocked podcast. Big thank you to my guest this week, PMW's news reporter Reem Makari, for joining me to touch on PMW's latest investigative series, 3 Tough Questions on AI, the current state of Google, and the future of search as well, and how that landscape might continue to change long into the future. They're 3 topics that we talk about a lot at PMW and across the industry, but they're ever-changing and ever-relevant to all of you marketers and advertisers out there listening. Thank you, of course, to you, the loyal listener, for tuning in each and every week as you do. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on your podcast platform of choice and find us on social media. We're on LinkedIn, TikTok, and YouTube, posting full episodes, our favorite clips and bits from the show, as well as all the other good multimedia stuff that we're trying to put out there for you to enjoy. Before I let you go this week, I did want to put a call out to your listeners for, in the coming weeks, we will be doing our first ever Performance Marketing Unlocked mailbag episode, where we take questions from you, our audience. Just what do you want to know from us? What do you want us to talk about more? Have you got anything that you've wished to be able to raise to myself or members of the PMW editorial team that you haven't had the opportunity to do so? If you would like to pose a question for the mailbag, you can email it to performancemarketingworld@haymarket.com, and we will try and fit it into an upcoming editorial episode where we dive into the mailbag of questions. So please submit those if you are interested. Of course, we'll be back in 7 days' time with another episode of the Performance Marketing Unlocked podcast. In the meantime, have an amazing week, and you'll be hearing from me again very shortly. Bye for now.